let me just add that there is a third sponsor, and thank you for mentioning the two German foundations, which is the Open Society Foundations, or many people might know the Soros Foundation in the world. So I would like to thank them also. Now, it's not so easy to be the fourth speaker, actually, because there will be some overlapping what I am going to say with that what you have already mentioned, but maybe it's not useless to emphasize some characteristics of the current situation. And I have a written contribution at the beginning, so let me read it if you all agree. So I would like to start with a description of the current Hungarian political context, and then I will move to the bigger European political space. Since I think you all know, and it was already mentioned, we do not want to focus exclusively on the very Hungarian situation. And when we talk about the problem that a member state might breach European values systematically, we certainly think first of all about Hungary, but as many of you mentioned, there are problems in many other member states as well. Although I would argue that the Hungarian case is a very unique one because the deepness of the problems. Well, the political regime we face today in Hungary might be called a failed illiberal democracy. When the concept, as Bence already mentioned, of this workshop, and there is a following one in Brussels early June, was elaborated after the infamous speech of Viktor Orbán in the summer of 2014 about an illiberal state, Viktor Orbán ruled the country in his full pomp. Nowadays, however, and we can quote British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, a week is a long time in politics. Now it seems that half a year in politics seems to be a century. First of all, in the very last month, Fidesz lost 3 by-elections. And as a consequence of these defeats, it also lost its 2/3 supermajority in the national parliament. This shift in the public mood also means that Orbán cannot change the constitution anymore so easily, or maybe at all, in order to render strong competencies to the president of the republic in case he wants to grasp this position in order to cement his power for another 7-9 years, starting from 2017. So this danger seems to evaporate by now. Secondly, the sicknesses of the regime now show evident and painful symptoms. Fresh state-led corruption scandals, unmasked by a courageous critical new generation of journalists, as well as irrational and unpopular domestic political decisions like the obsession to introduce an internet tax, which was blocked by huge demonstrations on the street, and another defeat against the commercial TV channel RTL Klub, which started to present critical news coverage as the reaction to discriminative state regulations, and the increasing isolation of the government in the international arena. A sort of cordon sanitaire has emerged around Orbán. Well, and especially it happened because of his so-called Eastern opening and his close friendship with Vladimir Putin. In the meantime, loud and open power struggles inside the inner circles of the Fidesz elite, as well as a brutal economic and very primitive rhetorical war between the former #1 oligarch of the regime, Lajos Simicska, and the Prime Minister himself, has dominated the public life in Hungary. So is this the endgame of the Fidesz story and the collapse of Orbán's rule in its current form? Well, it is certainly too early to call a total defeat. The over-centralized power structure is under huge pressure, but the ruling party still has a safe majority, and Fidesz seems to be the most popular political force nationwide, even today, after losing more than 1 million voters. Moreover, one of the alternatives, Jobbik, in spite of its softer language and maybe less radical political attitudes, at least on the top level, still jeopardizes, to use an understatement, the renovation of liberal democracy. And what would happen if left liberal democratic political forces win a future parliamentary elections? Would they have a chance to eliminate the legacy and the illiberal character of the system, which has been strongly institutionalized by the Fidesz government during its 4-year-long revolutionary Sturm und Drang activism? What if a coalition government has to be formed in 3 years, including Fidesz as the major political force? So we still have a lot of question marks, actually, concerning the future of Hungarian liberal democracy. Now, I would like to talk very shortly about the European context. First of all, we need to have a debate today on the definition, on the problem of how to call you. Illiberalism, populism, soft and hard Euroscepticism, majoritarianism, nationalism. Which terminology should be used in order to better understand new collective political beliefs, group and partisan identities inside and outside the European Union, challenging the core values of traditional Western democracies? Some observers claim that former fringe parties still do not have significant influence in European politics. Look at the composition of the European Parliament. However, in some of the member states, parliamentary elections resulted in political earthquakes. Populist parties are usually non-liberal, but not necessarily anti-democratic. Some argue they can even adjust to the system, or they will lose popular support when getting to power. But the clear and present danger in many big and small member states, combined with the experience provided by the practice of the current Hungarian government, might push leading European political elites towards the strengthening of safeguards against anti-liberal tendencies all over in Europe. I would argue that the Europeanization of the Hungarian case, following the first illiberal measures of the Orbán government in 2010, especially the introduction of the restrictive media laws, have saved the country from an even worse political outcome. The series of conflicts between the Hungarian government and the European institutions meant moral support to the opponents of the aggressive and fearful political regime at home, but at the same time gave a new reason to Orbán to mobilize pro-governmental sentiments against foreign, socialist and liberal political forces, proclaiming that these political groups simply express the interests and bitterness of big multinational companies. Actually, it was the European People's Party which followed a partisan political line and refused to condemn its member organization Fidesz, when most of the MEPs belonging to the EPP voted against the resolutions approved by the majority of the European Parliament between 2011 and 2013. Still, these resolutions, including the Tavares report on the state of democracy in Hungary, as well as the individual infringement procedures initiated by the European Commission, were not able to make many rapid and devastating changes to be withdrawn. The neutralization of the constitutional court through constitutional amendments and patronage, the nationalistic rhetoric of the preamble of the new basic law, the partisan regulatory media authority, the devaluation of the ombudsman system, or to mention an everyday human rights issue, the criminalization of the homeless people, are still with us. We do not have a simple answer, and maybe we will discuss it today, to a rather exciting question: whether it was the consequence of non-sufficient legal competencies at European level, or it was the lack of political will, as well as a cold pragmatism inside the higher circles of the main European political actors that ended up in halfway solutions when the EU had to face the negative Hungarian development. So should we search for a third way between parliamentary resolutions plus individual infringement procedures on the one hand, and the so-called nuclear option of Article 7 established by the Lisbon Treaty on the other? Or should we have no fear, including the citizens of the respective member state, of the use of Article 7 at all? Well, there is an open event today in Brussels organized by the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. The title of the forum is Problems of Representative Democracy in Europe, a conversation with Franz Timmermans. According to the invitation, the first Vice President of the European Commission is supposed to react to questions, I quote, whether it is the rise of populist parties like the True Finns who came second of the elections, the anti-democratic mentality, a democratic malaise, or the rejection of liberal democracy by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the number of threats is growing. Parallel to the event in the capital of the European Union, we will now discuss exactly the same dilemmas. I wish us a fruitful debate. So thank you for coming, and now let's move to our first session, which we just start right in time. The title of the session is Illiberal Democracies in the World, Conceptual Dilemmas and the Increasing Competition Between Different Models of Political Regimes in the Light of Populist and National Tendencies in Europe. As you all know, we will have 3 introductory remarks at the beginning of all sessions. All of them should be not more than 10 minutes each in order to have a real brainstorming for another hour or so following these introductions. So without talking too much now, I just want to say that the 3 speakers, we might say, but that means introductory remarks,